You're going to have to think about what I'm saying tonight. This is thoughtful and deliberate and important. Paul said he gloried only in the cross of Christ Jesus, by which the world is crucified unto me and I unto the world. Only the cross can effectually crucify the world from us and we from it. The world is too much with us because the cross has been neglected in our understanding and in our experience. Nothing less than the cross can separate us from a world that is powerfully seductive, at enmity with God, and lying in the wicked one. The real and pathetic condition of the lives of many Christians and the woeful condition of the church, the enormous fascination of the world and its powerful influence on God's people, all testify to the fact that we have tragically avoided the cross of Jesus. Why the painful disparity between our verbal professions and what is the actual condition of our lives? Why our powerlessness to affect the world? I think every one of us ought to be humiliated or humbled every time we pick up the book of Acts and read the glory that attended the life of that first church. By contrast, the most successful kind of Christianity that we know, the most charismatic, the most to be lauded and applauded, is utterly anemic and does not bear comparison. How is it that these rude men, fishermen and louts who had no advantage of the kind that we have enjoyed, were able to turn cities upside down and shake the earth? Why is it we have not had a corresponding effect in our own generation? The answer, in my opinion, is that in missing the cross, we have missed the power of the resurrection. We have sidestepped the cross as a subject, let alone as experience, because we have no tolerance or sympathy for suffering. Our ears have been stuffed full. Our eyes enjoy continual orgy of sense experience. It is painful to deny ourselves anything that bears upon our body. The denial of self in any form is suffering, and we have not been encouraged to that. We are unable and unwilling to face the issue of pain. We have overindulged and spoiled our youth, compromised truth in our marriages, suffered casualties and losses among our ministers, and given ground to the spirit of independence and rebellion in the churches, all because we cannot stand pain. We parents who indulge our kids rather than chasten them, are we being loving or self-indulgent? We pastors who condescend to placate men rather than speak the truth to them in love, why are we so sparing? We saints who see the defects and the things that need to be corrected in each other, why are we silent? Where are the Pauls of our generation who will confront the Peters who have compromised the gospel by being one thing with one group and another thing with another? Paul said he would not entertain that situation to go on beyond the moment for the purity of the gospel's sake, and publicly confronted Peter, who was the pillar of the church. I call that love. But you know that kind of love as an act is painful and it's humiliating. It's easy to be misunderstood, for which reason we prefer to keep quiet, for which reason the world is running amok with us, and for which reason we move into increasing carnality, not being corrected by one another. The avoidance of pain is a costly avoidance, and the symbol of the cross at the heart of the faith is an invitation to share in his sufferings. In a word, our Christianity is degenerating into a middle-class culture, a sanctifying cover-up for the status quo, a vacuous praise club, an equating of gain as godliness, a comfortable religiosity that leaves our real interests unchallenged and undisturbed in the avoidance of the cross of Christ Jesus. How many professing Christians live effectually as atheists, having no substantial difference in their lives from those in the world anywhere about them? Somehow, am I naive to think that we ought to look different, speak differently, act differently? We have lost even the difference, the sense of the difference between that which is sacred and that which is profane. for we ourselves are wallowing in the things that are earthly, common, unclean, and profane. In the religious unreality that pervades our church services, we are unconsciously yielding more and more to a spirit of manipulation to produce some semblance of life against the deadness and grayness of unresolved conflict, unconfessed sin, nurtured resentments, and inability to forgive, which are the evidence of the cross neglected. What are you going to do with a carnal congregation who brings in their dead weight and their grayness? You're compelled, if you're going to have anything that's called, quote, a successful service, unquote, to condescend to manipulation. Manipulation is the antithesis of faith. Altogether, there is an inexorable tendency to brainwash and conform men till we are all persuaded we are seeing the emperor's new clothes while he is yet pathetically naked. Do you know the story of how two shifty tailors came to town? A couple of hucksters who told the king that they had certain golden thread and they would weave him a gorgeous wardrobe unlike anything that any king had ever worn. And so when the poor man came to be fitted, he saw nothing. But he heard the ecstatic oohs and ahs of these tailors and their henchmen and thought, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. I guess it is beautiful, but I don't see it. How many times have you sat leaden in a congregation and thought, I guess there's something wrong with me, when the truth of the matter is there was something right with you, which you should not have squelched and swallowed down. If you did it, it was to the detriment of your spirit and made your discernments dull. How much of our modern religion is the emperor's new clothes? Everybody's oohing and eyeing. Lots of amens and hallelujahs and loud choruses and exclamations and ecstatic references till you feel, gee, maybe there's something wrong with me. I better enter into this, and you do, by the flesh. But the pathetic thing is, the emperor is yet naked. Until we come to the nakedness of the cross, we'll not have the garment of his righteousness. At the time when the church should be preparing herself to be a visible place of refuge in a coming age of disaster, as an island of sanity and reality in a sick world, she herself is declining into pusillanimous faith and superstition. She is producing a new breed of super executives, slick promoters, computer centers, and multi-million-dollar facilities that have elicited even the admiration of the world, but has no message for it. I'm amazed, depression babe that I am, at what we are producing or what is being produced in this generation in slick religious executives, promoters of which the world might well be proud, who build their little petty kingdoms of multi-million-dollar kinds with hundreds upon hundreds sitting in their pews looking upon the emperor's new clothes. I came back with such a cry from a recent overseas trip that the gospel, the everlasting gospel of Jesus Christ, needs to be proclaimed, not so much to the world as first to the church. It is amazing how few Christians know it, how few understand it, how few have been affected by it, how few are living in it. People simply insist on clinging to their resentments, their bitternesses, their unconfessed sins. And because we have cowards in the pulpit, and because we don't want to be shaken or disturbed, we put a thin gloss over that whole mess and try and pump up some measure of successful religion that will bring a flush to our cheek and give us a Sunday hour. Have you not read the final verse of the 2nd chapter of the book of Ephesians? To God be glory in the church. Our religion becomes increasingly a performance, monotonous and predictable rather than a lively and life-giving communion of the saints. There's nothing that you can predict with greater regularity than what's going to happen in church on Sunday. Waiting on God in silence that would reveal our spiritual bankruptcy is drowned out by our amplifiers and ceaseless activity, lest we acknowledge our condition. There's a reason why we're uncomfortable with silence. There is a tacit and unspoken agreement between clergy and congregation by which the show goes on for the preservation of a safe status quo while carnality and sin abound, unchecked and unaddressed, in the lives both of the congregants and the minister. If the prophet Isaiah, seeing the Lord high and lifted up, cried out, "Woe is me, I am undone. I am a man of unclean lips, and I live in the midst of a people of unclean lips." What then shall we say, who are not prophets and oracles of God? We need to have our vision and our sight corrected. We need to address our lives to the plumb line of God, the standard of God, the cross of Christ Jesus. Not academically, religiously, or superficially, but in the actual experience of our lives as those who have come willing to abandon everything. Paul said, "I'm determined to know nothing but Christ and Him crucified." We need desperately and urgently to know Him exactly as He is,